You may know you're listening to this show along the Marketing Podcast Network, but did you know there are other great shows on MPN to help your business? Jamie Lieberman hosts a great podcast called the Unbusiness Podcast. Jamie, tell us what these fine folks will get when they listen.
The Unbusiness Podcast provides interviews with real-life entrepreneurs to talk about their struggles, their strategies, and how they have had success and what they've done in the face of failure. It is a real-life look at what it means to own your own business and gives you real takeaways on how you can make yours better.
Awesome. Where can people subscribe?
Go to #legal.com/podcasts. Find the show at marketingpodcasts.net or search for the Unbusiness Podcast wherever you get your podcasts.
You heard her. Go subscribe. You may know you're listening to this show along the Marketing Podcast Network, but did you know there are other great shows on MPN to help your business? Christopher Hines hosts a great podcast called Pod Central. Chris, tell us what these fine folks will get when they listen.
We help you launch, grow, or monetize your podcast. We even help those podcast business owners out there grow their agencies and get more clients. This is a place where you come to learn everything podcasting.
Wow. Where can people subscribe?
Search for the podcast wherever you listen to your shows, or find me on Twitter at Chris Podcasting, and I can send it to you directly.
Or go to marketingpodcasts.net.
I'm Nick Westergaard, and this is On Brand, helping you tell your story. My guest this week is the one, the only, Tom Peters.
I think the most important first step is to say, wow, it's a new year. It is a time for refreshment. Let's not waste the first week of January. Let's make this year 2023 feel different than the past. We know we've got a set of issues which is staggeringly long. Let's cherry pick one or two and see what we can do with it.
Tom Peters is back for an unprecedented fourth visit to the On Brand podcast to celebrate the first show of the new year. Called the Red Bull of management consultants, Tom Peters is a leading business management guru and founder of the Tom Peters Company. Peters is the best-selling author of 17 books, including In Search of Excellence with Robert H. Waterman Jr., which is often cited as among the best business books ever written. His latest book is Tom Peters' Compact Guide to Excellence. Tom, welcome back to On Brand.
Thank you very much. I'm delighted and honored to be on this first show of the new year.
Well, as I said, the one and only Tom Peters, it occurred to me that you're the one and only of so many things, but the one and only here of 2023. And I want to say this may, over the years, be your fourth appearance on the On Brand podcast. And I am thrilled to kick off the new year and to chat about your book, your latest book, the Compact Guide to Excellence. And what I love is you sent me a copy of this, and it has a little message in here that says, "Same message 20 times. I refuse to give up." So I thought that was the most Tom Peters thing that I'd read. So. Talk about the same message and why you're not giving up.
Going way back to either 79 or 82, which was the beginning of the In Search of Excellence research and the publication of the book, we had the centerpiece of the book was something we called the 8 Basics. And the 8 Basics focused on these radical notions of putting people first. Listen to your customer. Don't worry about the plans. Just get the hell out there on the field and run your first play, and so on. And obviously the book sold well, and people thought that was news. And we find ourselves, obviously, in the midst of a pretty tumultuous time at home right now. And the message is still fundamentally the same. The research says that 20 to 30% of people feel connected to their jobs. 70 to 80% are not connected to their jobs. And as far as I'm concerned, that's not because of the job, that's because of the leader. I mean, I understand they're really poorly paying jobs, et cetera, and I'm empathetic, sympathetic, empathetic to that. But fundamentally, the effective leader can instill caring, respect, engagement, pretty much regardless of what the situation is. And, to put it in truly kind of temporal terms, I figure if somebody is disengaged at work, it takes the odds way up that they might tend to be engaged in something that we would call unpleasant. They would be easy meat at some level. So, it's those themes. I think, at some level, I'd like to jump off a bridge and quit, because if you say people first for 43 years in a row and people don't get it, there's either something wrong with me or the listeners, one or the other. But I'm not going to give up, because I've said to people, when Tony Robbins goes into a room, an auditorium with 1,000 people, he expects to change 1,000 lives. If I go into room with 1,000 people, and I would say this is the same thing, for you with viewers and so on, if 4 or 5 people come out totally turned on and ready to do something different, I have had one hell of a good day. So they're going to, that in that old useless metaphor, they're going to have to carry me out on a stretcher or some such thing.
Well, it's as you get to the kind of, like you were kind of breaking down, it's either something's wrong with getting the message out or with the audience. But I also think, like, the in-between piece of that, it makes me think of another one of your quotes through the years that I always grab onto, because I first of all, I kind of hate the label soft skills, because there's something, it's kind of said as though it's something additional. It's a nice to have. It's not a need to have. But it's that quote of yours that I got to think so I get it right, which is it hard is soft and soft is hard? Did I get it right?
I got it. You got it. Absolutely nailed it.
But I think that what you're talking about, the easy part is listening to a podcast, sitting here and nodding your head. The hard part is actually doing something about it. It's not easy work. Fostering that connection that people obviously don't have with their work.
I think it's not easy work, but I think there are some substantive ways that we can make it a heck of a lot easier. I feel badly for not remembering the name of the book or the author, but there was a terrific book a couple of years ago on hiring. And it was either in the subtitle or the first sentence, and it said, the most important thing that a leader does is hire people. And virtually no leaders take it anywhere nearly as seriously as they should. And that really hit me right between the eyes. If we want thoughtful people in leadership positions or thoughtful people on the front line, it sure as hell would help if we hired people who were thoughtful. As obvious as that is, there's a guy who's quoted in the book, and he's the CEO of a biotech firm, and those places are about as sophisticated as it gets, in my opinion. And he said, we have a culture which is the basics of our performance, and in order to execute that culture, we only hire nice people. And he went on, because we're not talking about a fast food chain. He went on and he said a lot of people couldn't even name the sophistication of the degrees that some of our R&D people have. But he said, I learned over the years that regardless of how obscure it sounds, there are a lot of people out there that have got that degree. Don't hire the jerks. And I think it's, my two big things are the hiring thing, and even more so is who the heck you promote. If you want a thoughtful organization, your decision as to who your first line managers are, I'll go with our buddy on hiring is number one, but 1A is the promotion to first line leadership.
So, and Say more about, because you said we could make it easier. The most important thing a leader does is hiring, is promoting. What are leaders not doing when it comes to hiring and promoting? Are they not as engaged, involved as they should be? What's the disconnect?
Well, I think both substance and attention are the disconnects. First of all, it's writing the specs for the leadership job or writing the specs for hiring. Like our friend who says he only hires nice people. A couple of folks whose names slipped my mind wrote a fabulous book 8 or 10 years ago, and it was called Management Lessons from the Mayo Clinic. And every time you see a rating of the great health services in the United States, Mayo is almost invariably number one. And I hope that our viewers, listeners are going to listen carefully to the next paragraph. You are the hottest shot neurosurgeon God has ever put on earth. And you are applying for a job at Mayo, and I'm interviewing you. And during the course of, and I fall in love with you, with your talent. During the course of the interview, what you are unaware of, and listen closely because this sounds so maybe strange at first hearing, I am counting literally the number of times you use the word we and the number of times you use the word I. And I don't care if your neurological surgical skills are the best in the planet. If the I's beat the we's, buddy, we're not going to hire you. And the interesting thing about that is, you talk about, well, did people read your book? Well, no. Dr. Mayo started that in 1914. And he talked about what he called the practice of team medicine. Everybody's on the same team. And there's this wonderful little example again in the book that I love. So you've got a kid who comes to work for Mayo. I don't know, he's a surgeon or whatever he is. Whatever he is, he's really new to the organization, and he's sitting at his desk, and he, gets a call or he gets the text or something like that. And it's Dr. Famous, who is in the middle of a surgery. And Dr. Famous says, now, Nick, here's what's going on. And I've got a conundrum. I can kind of do it this way, or I could do it that way. You've been to medical school more recently than I have. What do you suggest? And, the kid in question was saying, oh, my God, the 18-year-old, who in this instance is probably a 26-year-old, is being asked by God, what should I do to save Tom's life? And it's that kind of engagement. There's a woman who's quoted, and she said, a woman surgeon with a superb historic record who said, I feel 100 times more engaged in Mayo than I ever did before in my career. And so it's, hire the we's, not the I's. There's another University of Pennsylvania study where it had to do with health services people who were helping old people. And they developed a new hiring process that involved things like coffee clutches. And I chatted with people at coffee clutches. And if the people at the coffee clutches were easy to chat with, if I could find out that they'd had a record of community service at home, at any rate, that was a completely new hiring process. And one of the results, and this does not sound credible, is their annual turnover went from 70%, 70, to 1.7%. And it was just a different set of hiring practices.
Wow.
I mean, good God, 70 to 1.7, if it didn't come from a bunch of certified University of Pennsylvania researchers, all of whom have triple PhDs, you would say, what a crock of crap.
Well, there's a lot there too that is important. A lot of pieces of that process too, in terms of what they're hiring for, what they're doing along the way, and then even measuring and talking about engagement more regularly, I think helps to foster that between leadership, the organization, and the people.
Yeah, I'm 98% with you, and the only 2%,
where'd I lose you?
Yeah, that you lost me. I have no problem with the measurement, but dear God, you have to be careful.
Yeah, a good point.
There's no arena on earth where you have to be more careful than measurement. The ability to demotivate by inducing slavery to a measurement number is very, very high. And when I say that, incidentally, again, relative to our viewers and listeners, I am not against numbers. I have 4 degrees, and they are all quantitative degrees, 2 in engineering, 2 in business. So I am not anti-measurement, I can assure you. But I've been around and read enough and seen the unintended consequences of particularly, well, I mean, the classic example was the great god of 20 years ago, Six Sigma, to do the quality improvement. And it was fabulous as it was put together, but then it became slavish devotion to making your numbers and, not paying attention to the very things that you and I are talking about right now.
Yeah.
I mean, they say, there was an art, one of the infamous GE people who left to GE to run 3M. There was a cover story, I think it was in Fortune or Business Week a few years later, that said how Six Sigma almost killed innovation at 3M. And innovation by the numbers is a contradiction in terms.
Oh,
On Brand will be right back after this.
You may know you're listening to this show along the Marketing Podcast Network, but did you know there are other great shows on MPN to help your business? Lacey Boggs hosts and produces a great podcast called Ace Stone Marketing Detective. Little bit different than your normal podcast on MPN. Lacey, tell us what these fine folks will get when they listen.
Ace Stone Marketing Detective is a fully scripted and produced fictional radio play that follows crack marketing detective Ace Stone as she bamboozles the bad guys and detects dastardly deeds in the marketing industry. The podcast is a funny, tongue-in-cheek look at content marketing, shady marketers, and suspicious marketing techniques online. And I think it's a fun new way to have a business podcast that proves that marketing can be playful and effective.
Where can people subscribe to this thing?
You can go to acemarketingdetective.com or find it in your favorite podcast player or go to the Marketing Podcast Network.
You heard her. Go subscribe. You may know you're listening to this show along the Marketing Podcast Network, but did you know there are other great shows on MPN to help your business? Carrie Barrett hosts a great podcast called The VIQ Project. Carrie, tell us what these fine folks will get out of listening.
Okay, you know how you go to shoot a 2-minute video, except it takes 2 hours. You hate yourself on camera. You don't know what to do with it, and so it doesn't perform. You'll get all the tips and tricks you need to fix all of that on this podcast.
Wow, we're going to be lining up for this. Where can people subscribe?
You can find it on my website, which is carriebarrett.com. You can also find it if you search the VIQ Project Podcast on YouTube. Of course, you can find the show at marketingpodcasts.net, or you can subscribe and search for the VIQ Project Podcast wherever you get your podcasts.
You heard her. Go subscribe.
Now, back to the show.
so I want to talk a bit about your new book. And part of what got me excited about this book is in the very title itself is something that feels different, because we are overwhelmed with great business books. We're all several behind, and it's the time of year where all the lists come out of all the stuff that you haven't read. But I love that you position this as a compact guide. So why was that compactness important to you in giving this message another go?
Well, there are several reasons. I have been talking vigorously, I believe, for well over 20 years now about the topic of design. and how incredibly important design is. And, you know, you go back to measures. I've got a bunch of quotes. My favorite design quote, which is numerical, not really, but it was talking about the Mini Cooper S or the Mini Cooper 6, whatever it was. And the comment in the analysis was, no vehicle ever built has caused more smiles. But, you know, at some level, that's kind of the point.
Yeah.
It's products and services, and I underscore services because it's as true for a training course as it is for a new car, that sing, that inspire, that are special, that uplift you. And I think words like that are as appropriate, again, for a process as they are for a product. So that was kind of the idea. And then God intervened, and I got hooked up with this incredible designer. Her name is Nancy Green. She's on everybody's list of 100 great designers on earth. How the hell she stooped to working with an old engineer like me, God alone knows. But she has produced a beautiful, engaging product. I mean, there's a funny thing about it. If you look at the spine of the book, you will see not Tom Peters, but you will see Tom Peters and Nancy Green. And, you know, I was writing a special acknowledgement to Nancy, and I thought, for God's sakes, she's either the co-author or the principal author. But, you know, it's meant to be compact. It's meant to attract your attention. It consists mainly of straightforward and we think powerful quotes without 900 words of Tom Peters bullshit that follows the quote. And, you know, the book is the look, the feel, the taste, the touch, the smell. I mean, maybe, you know, as I said, I was trained as an engineer and so on. On the other hand, when my first book came out and I was living in Palo Alto, one of the first companies I consulted with was Apple. And this was Apple 1984, when I think the first Mac had just arrived, because I attended the launch ceremony of it. And, you know, you think of what the computers looked like. First of all, a desktop computer was about the size of a refrigerator, and the control systems were hopeless. And Steve gave us something where it was a pleasure to use. You know, my book, which was drafted in 80 and released in 82, my and Bob Waterman's book, we did it on an Apple II. It was, holy shit, they did it on Apple II. Oh my God, can you believe it? And before that, and this is personal to you. When I first went to work for McKinsey, I came to Iowa. I was working with a chemical company called Hawkeye Chemical. And I wanted to demonstrate to them that I was a with it guy. So I flew, listen carefully, my dearest beloved friends. I flew from San Francisco to Chicago, renting 2 seats in the front row. 1 seat for Tom Peters. Please believe me, I'm not a liar. And 1 seat for my portable computer, which, you know, was that wide and weighed, I don't know, 50, 60 pounds, about the same size as the crystals I use to purify the water today. And I was doing that to show them I was cool. You know, I thought, I'm going to get these Midwestern chemists and really, you know, give them what for. And you know, we've come a long way, but it is that, you know, I remember reading somewhere when Steve died, and somebody said Steve Jobs was not an inventor. He was how did they use it? He was an improvement fanatic. Yeah. He did tiny little things and tiny little things and tiny little things until he had created something that was totally different from what he had when he started. And so I buy the Design Act, and I really wanted to have a hard-hitting message. You know, I tried to figure out how I might use my own book. And I, you know, flipped it open to a random page, and the random page, well, I could do it right now. I was talking about women, and this said, one thing is certain: women's rise to power which is linked to the increase in wealth per capita, is happening in all domains and all levels of society. This is just the beginning. The phenomenon will only grow as girls prove to be more successful than boys in the school system, which is happening. For a number of observers, we have already entered the age of womenomics, the economy as thought out and practiced by women. And this actually comes from a French woman. But the point is, forget the content, important as I think it is, I think I could pull the book open to a random page with 5 of my colleagues, and I would say, that's kind of cool. Let's talk about it. You could talk about that damn page for the next 10 hours or 10 days without Tom Peters's 900 frigging words of commentary. And Nancy and I think that 90% of these quotes are like that. They are thought starters, not thought finishers. You don't get 30 lines of implementation. It's, wow, what does that really mean? What's the implication? What's the implication for us? What's the implication here, there, everywhere? And that's the whole point. And as somebody who wrote a book called Liberation Management in 1992 with 900 pages, it's a long way from there to the Compact Guide to Excellence.
Well, it's funny. I opened it up to a random page too, and when I heard that you did that, I thought this could be like a magician's card trick if we had via a Zoom call opened to the same random page, but we didn't.
Yeah, boy.
But we didn't. But it was equally provocative, especially with what we were just talking about, because I flipped or opened it to the piece on design. We're defined by design. Design is spirit. Design is soul. Design is heart. And as you just spoke to, both on design, but also on, I think it's interesting to talk not only about how a book's designed, but intended use of books. Because I don't know that we do that enough. I think there's the one way of sitting down and I'm going to read through this, and maybe there's the advanced version where I write some notes and flag some things. But then there's what you said of let's open this and use it as a thought starter. And I think that speaks to kind of where we started the conversation with engagement and work.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So I want to be both mindful of our time and also mindful of the time of year. As we're talking about excellence, we've switched over to the calendars. We're in a new year. We want to do things differently. We want to be improvement addicts, like you said with Steve Jobs. In looking at a new year, what is the best path when it comes to excellence in the new year?
Well, silly as it sounds, I think the most important first step is to say, wow, it's a new year. It is a time for refreshment, not meaning that we have to go a different place than we were before, but, kind of let's not waste the first week of January. Let's make this year 2023 feel different than the past. We know we've got a set of issues which is staggeringly long. Let's cherry pick one or two and see what we can do with it. What you say, what is excellence? And I wrote this thing near the end of the book, and actually, frankly, in my last book, and it said, excellence is not an aspiration. Excellence is not a hill to climb. Excellence is the next 5 minutes, or it is nothing at all. It is the next text message. It is the next chance meeting in the hallway. And that's the driver. When you and I have a 4-minute meeting in the hallway in the first week of January, and I'm smiling, and I could say, oh shit, here we go again. Or what I could say is, holy smokes, it's 2023. Let's not lose the first week. Let's see what we can find to do that might take us down a slightly different path. We've talked forever about doing these things about engaging people. What can you and I, who randomly stopped in the hall to talk to each other, we're both not exactly low IQ people, or they wouldn't have hired us. What are 3 things that you and I could do in the next hour that would uplift or get people to feel better about where they were and what they were doing, and feel that their work was, all this research says people want to feel important. People want to feel as if they're doing something useful. If you're a total cynic, you say, well, the only damn thing they want is for the day to come as end. Yeah, they want the day to come to the end as fast as possible if you're treating them like shit during the day, and excuse my language. But, we would all like to be, I don't know about you, but, I know this probably dates me because I don't know what's going on now. I had a good Cub Scout leader and a bad Cub Scout leader. And the bad Cub Scout leader made me feel as if I had gone to the United States Marine Corps recruit depot in San Diego, California. And the great one was, we're a bunch of kids. This is an hour to, what if we kids, says this Cub Scout leader, what if we did something little for the community in the next week? What if we cleaned up the trash on, Main Street where people toss stuff out of their cars? And, that's that, as I said, the whole excellence theme to me is now. Not, what are your earnings going to be on 12/31/2023? I don't want to know that. I want to know how people are going to feel better and more engaged. We're having this conversation, let us say, I don't even know whether it's a weekday or a weekend. We're having the conversation on the 7th day of January, 2023. How are people going to feel a little bit more engaged by the end of this day or the end of this week? And let's not bullshit each other. Let's have a meeting right outside, the restroom at this time next week, and let's give ourselves a report card on the last 7 days.
Well, these moments matter. It's funny that you said the good Cub Scout leader, the bad Cub Scout leader. I'm sure I could get to the bad ones, but boy, do I remember the good ones. I had you telling this story, and I think it's connected to these moments of excellence that stand out. I had a Boy Scout leader named Bill Schmidt, who I must have done something good as a leader of my patrol or whatever, but says to me, a 12-year-old kid at the time says, or the scout leader says to me, "You're a scholar and a gentleman." And I'm like, God, I've never been called that, but it stuck with me to be treated that way. And it was just this little moment that probably helped light some kind of fire.
Yeah, no, I think that I give you A++, because I think it is precisely that kind of thing. There's a quote by some famous author, I think it's William James or Henry James, and he's talking about appreciation, and he said, people don't like appreciation. People don't think positively about appreciation. They crave appreciation. Yeah. And I think it really is deep in that regard. And just a smile, there's this, I think I use it in the book, and I certainly use it in everything I'm writing these days because I had just come across it, even though I'm sure it's a million years old. You are a teacher in a 7th grade class. I don't care if it's history or math. 23 people in the class. In the morning, as the class is starting, you stand in the doorway and you literally acknowledge each student, not with a talk, not with a clever line, but you say, "Morning, Craig. Snowing like hell out there, isn't it?" The wind coming off Lake Michigan is 100 miles an hour this morning. "Oh, hi, Nancy. I remember you had that head cold and you sound a little bit better." It's not a speech. It's at the most a sentence. And so the man or the woman who's the teacher does that. And then the researchers step in, and the number of disciplinary incidents in that class go down by something like 25%. And hard-nosed measures of academic engagement go up by 20%. And it's, and all it was, just acknowledging Craig as a living human being who busted his ass enough to get here on time and walk in the door. And as a teacher, so I get off a little bit on Craig in the best sense of that word. And we should not have anybody coming out of teacher school who does not get off on the Craigs of the world, doesn't have that feel for their fellow human beings and young human beings in the case of a 7th or 3rd or 4th grade teacher.
Yeah. Now, well said. Well, you've made me smile a lot during our chat together, and I didn't warn you like I usually do, guests, but you've been on several times, so it shouldn't be that hard to get at. But we always wrap up with asking for a brand that has made you smile recently.
I'm trying to not give a technically correct answer, but
This whole thought process is intriguing to me with what this smile is.
Get me in trouble or make me the hero of the week. Nothing irritates me more than opening a roll of new toilet paper and not being able to pull the first ply off. And I got a set of toilet paper rolls, and God designed them. You know, I don't remember whether they were Scots or who they were. They were, oh my God, Cottonelle. And, you know, Cottonelle has invented a toilet paper roll that's a joy. And, you know, I think it's a good example because it's, you know, what you're saying is as true of toilet paper rolls as it is of, you know, software inside the iPhone. But I really, honest to God, when I opened it up, I really did smile because I could see myself standing next to the toilet, trying to pull that first damn sheet off and ripping it and sitting there swearing in my best language from my 4 years in the Navy. But, you know, hats off to Cottonelle.
I think that brings it home nicely. Tom, where can
and folks... maybe gets either you or both of us a lifetime supply of Cottonelle toilet.
There we go. Or at the very least, someone from Cottonelle should absolutely come on the On Brand podcast and talk about how this happened. Yeah. We want the full story. So, Tom, where can folks go to learn more about who you are and what you do?
Very simple, tompeters.com. We have pretty much everything I've done for the last 20 years. All of it is free. All of it is downloadable. We've got such things as the slide decks from my last 500 slide shows and speeches, and any darn thing, you know, you can name, including when we have the time to have the link. When the time comes, we will have the link to this conversation and any other podcasts I've done. So that's an easy starting point, and it's the best starting point. And I think it's a pretty user-friendly site.
Awesome. Well, we will link up to all of that in our show notes, which folks can find at onbrandpodcast.com. Tom, thanks for being on brand with us.
Thank you for the 4th invitation. I will look forward to the next one if I didn't screw this one up entirely.
It was the toilet paper thing.
It was the toilet. Yeah. Oh, yeah. From now on, when I talk about podcasts, I say, I was talking to the toilet paper guy.
It's the toilet paper guy. The toilet paper guy in Iowa.
Yeah. Yes. The best of all. Toilet paper guy in Manhattan. Who the hell cares? The toilet paper guy from Iowa
knows his toilet paper.
Is the real winner. And I'm going to find out if my old friends at Hawkeye Chemical are still around.
Awesome. Thanks, Tom. On Brand is part of the Marketing Podcast Network. If you like what you're hearing, if we've made you smile, you can always listen free on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or whatever your favorite platform may be. And please take a moment and rate and review the podcast to help others find the show. Until next week, I'm Nick Westergaard, and I'll see you on the internet.
This podcast is heard along the Marketing Podcast Network. For more great marketing podcasts, visit marketingpodcasts.net.